Is it recording? Okay, so welcome to Eco 501 Section 2, Week 9. Acha. This week we are going to cover oligopoly, and oligopoly will cover in the next week as well. Today we just look at some crucial parts of oligopoly, how equilibrium in our oligopoly is determined, and what types of oligopolies we have. Okay, so let's start the screen sharing. Acha. So oligopoly, acha, you know what oligo means? Does anybody know what oligo means? Oligo.
Oligo means one.
No, one is mono, two is duo.
Means between 2 to 3. Means
More
this.
than one, but not too much. Few.
Yeah, few.
A few,
So,
but it means, but it's not a lot. Okay, so basically oligopoly, since we are defining a market by the number of sellers, at least two sellers exist in this market, but not many like monopolistic competition. Okay, so how many can exist? We'll address that question later. But oligo means few, and poly means is the Greek word for sellers. So few sellers. Okay, so what we're going to do, we'll divide the lecture into 5 parts. Part 1 is revisiting perfect competition. Then we look at the assumptions of oligopoly. That means which assumption of perfect competition we break. Number 3, we look at types of oligopoly. Number 4, we look models of oligopoly. And then we start game theory today with very simple application of the Nash equilibrium and the prisoner's dilemma. The file of these 2 chapters, I'll share it after the class in your Facebook group. Okay, I don't think we need to get into details of this assumption. The main thing was the implication of perfect competition was nobody had market power. That means nobody could influence the quantity at which things will sell. Nobody can influence the price at which a particular commodity or service will sell. So why was this possible? There was too many buyers and too many sellers, all producing a homogeneous good, and decisions were independent. This is one assumption we're going to break today. Okay, independent decision making. This will become interdependent decision making. So up until now, even up to monopolistic competition, we have looked at decision making as independent decision making. Today it will become interdependent. Another assumption we are going to break, we may break, we may not break, that is homogeneous goods. And the main assumption that we are going to break is that we have few sellers. So we're going to break 3 assumptions. The many sellers will become few sellers, and thus the name oligopoly. Independent decision making. Independent decision making will become what do you call it? Interdependent. Homogeneous we may or may not break. So what was the implication? The implication, which was a commodity market. Does everybody remember what a commodity market is? Does anybody remember what a commodity market is? Can you guys hear me?
yes, sir.
Do you remember what a commodity market is? Okay, I'll say it again. A commodity market is where price is uniform for each unit and all the commodities are uniform. Today we will see that the quality of the product can be uniform, but price will be different. We're going to break quite a lot of assumptions today. Okay. Now, what is the first assumption that we're going to break from perfect competition? The many sellers become few sellers. Okay. So, and each seller has significant market share. when we were looking at monopolistic competition, we said that there's two segments in the market, dominant firms on one end and lots of small firms on the fringe end. Over here, we're going to see few sellers. If there are few sellers supplying the total market demand, the total market output, definitely each seller has a significant market share with which they can influence the market outcome. How can that be possible? That can be possible because number one, the firms can decide to collude. Do you know what collusion means? Do you know what collusion means? Collusion.
So striking each other.
That
When
means
two companies try to deal,
sorry, কে কি বললো? একজন কি বললো?
Sir, when two companies or more companies try and decide together, you know, what should happen in the market.
Yes, that means decisions are made jointly.
Yeah. They try to
Okay.
strike a
Up until now, what we said that if there are four producers in the market and each has 25% of the total market share, we said that it is highly competitive, right? But when one firm has 25% of the market share, another has 25, these two can jointly decide that the two of us will jointly decide what to do. If that is the case, then the total market share becomes 50% of that merger. So because each firm has a dominant market share, the market, with that market share, they can influence through collusion. Later on, we're going to use the words cartel, collusion, and lots of other terms. But for the time being, we just know that because of market share, they can collude. Now, in a oligopoly, we could have firms selling homogeneous goods. How many petroleum exporting countries are there in this world? Are there too many or few? Petroleum exporting countries?
Very few, sir.
Very few, right? There are some in the Middle East, some in the two Americas. Russia is a exporter, and that's it. And everybody sells the same commodity, crude oil. The oil that comes from the ground is called crude oil. Later on, we when it comes to Bangladesh, since we don't produce, what happens? We make it diesel, we make it octane, etc. through processing. But the crude oil that we buy from, say, for example, Saudi Arabia or any other country, it is the same homogeneous good. So there are very few suppliers in the world who export crude oil, and that is the same crude oil for everybody. At the same time, we can have a market which with few sellers that sells differentiated goods, like automobile. How many automobile companies are there in Bangladesh? Are there too many?
No, sir, few.
So
Very few.
producing or just resales?
They're selling, for example, Toyota, Nissan, okay, say Tata, and then you have Jaguar, etc., Mercedes. There aren't too many sellers who sell in Bangladesh automobiles. Their products are differentiated products, right? Definitely, in your eyes, a Toyota car would be different from, say, a Maruti Suzuki car or a Jaguar car. So in the petroleum market, we have, in the crude oil market, we have homogeneous goods supplied by few sellers. In the automobile market, we have differentiated goods sold by few sellers. But the thing to know is that in the case of differentiated goods in an oligopoly, differentiation is not cosmetic. Last week we saw that we could have cosmetic differentiation, like pink soap and the blue soap. Ingredient wise, pink soap and blue soap are the same thing. There's no difference between the two. But when we have few sellers, like in the automobile industry, don't you think that the differentiation is a real differentiation?
No, sir.
You don't think so?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, because a lot of this differentiation depends on R&D. R&D means research and development. Research and development itself, by definition, costs a lot of money. If we look at the pharmaceutical industry, okay, how many global pharmaceutical suppliers are there? Do we have any pharmaceutical students, people working in the pharmaceutical industry in this class? Do we have people working in the pharmaceutical industry in this class? Okay, we don't, no problem. We, globally, there are হাতে গোনা কয়েকটা pharmaceutical industry আছে. You may argue that there are lots of pharmaceutical firms in Bangladesh. They produce tablets and other medications, but they don't. They take copyright from some large pharmaceutical and then they produce in Bangladesh because of cheap labor, etc. Just like our garments industry. But globally, there are very few pharmaceutical firms. Why? Because these pharmaceutical firms requires a lot of research and development. So this itself creates restriction for other firms to enter. Acha, এই জিনিসটা হচ্ছে the thing that we said, under perfect competition, we had independent decisions. How did we define independent decisions? My decision does not influence yours. The vice versa is also true. Your decision does not influence mine. So when we introduce the word interdependent, what does that mean? That it means two things. If X decides to make a move with, it's one second, please. So just a second, I can't avoid this phone call. My sorry, এটা আমি এটা ফোনটা অফ করে দিছি. আচ্ছা, what does interdependency mean? If X makes a move, let's say that he's playing a game, he takes into consideration the response of Y. For example, when we play chess, if I'm white, I make the first move, I definitely take into consideration the response or the set of responses that Y will make. So my decision of moving the pawn from one square to another depends on the response of what the other party will do. So interdependent decision, first of all, is when under perfect competition, I was not taking into consideration what others are doing. Reverse was also true. Here, I'm taking into consideration what others are doing, number one. Number two, what happens is, my decision depends on you, your decision depends on me. Is that clear? Interdependent decision making?
Yes, sir.
My decision depends on what you do, reverse is also true. Your decision depends on what I do. Just put your just register this as interdependent decision making. Today we will be using introducing game theory, and in game theory we will be showing how an equilibrium can come with this thought. I'm doing the best I can, assuming you are also doing the best you can. You are thinking just in the opposite direction. You are doing the best you can, assuming that I am doing the best I can. But that's it. Just remember this much for the time being. Now, a market is an oligopoly. This is a legal definition. Last class I said, if the top 4 firms have at least 50% of the total market share, then we define it as an oligopoly. There may be 7 firms in the market, but if the top 4 firms dominate 50% of the total market share, we define it as an oligopoly. Today we will be changing the definition of this, but this is the definition that we start with. This is known as the Herfindahl-Hirschman index. Based on this, lots of firms in America have been broken by the central government under the Sherman Act. Anyhow, acha. What was our first assumption? That the top four firms will have more than 50% of the market share.
50% shares.
Udharan hocche eta. Look at this one. The global tobacco industry. What's the total market share of these four? 16, 29, 30, 40, 50. Oh, exactly 50. So in the total global tobacco market, these four firms have 50% of the total market share in the world. This is based on 2010 data. We said that we are going to change this definition. Look at a tripoly market in America in 2010. Coca-Cola had 37% of the total market share. Pepsi-Cola had 30, and Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper, have you seen Dr. Pepper?
Yes, sir. Producer of 7-Up.
Okay.
Dr. Pepper and 7-Up.
Have you tried it? Have you tried Dr. Pepper?
Yes, sir.
Did you like it?
Not really.
Dr. Pepper is the Western version of our Mojo. Do you like Mojo?
No, sir. It tastes like cough syrup somehow.
Sir, one cousin of mine, ওর একটা মুদির দোকান আছে। তো ও আমাকে একদিন বললো, তুমি যদি মুদির দোকান না দাও, তুমি একটা জিনিস শিখতে পারবে না। আমি বললাম, কি জিনিস সেটা? বাংলাদেশ, ঢাকার মানুষ নাকি কোকের চেয়ে বেশি মোজো খায়। Would you believe it? আমাদের একটা ধারণা কি, মানে people who are educated like us, so called educated, তারা মনে করবে না যে বাংলাদেশের ঢাকার মানুষরা বেশি কোক আর পেপসি খাবে। ঢাকার মানুষরা সবচেয়ে বেশি খায় হলো মোজো, surprisingly. Anyhow, so this is a tripoly firm. Acha, this is a duopoly industry, global. Look at the global industry. 99% of the market share is dominated by two firms, Boeing and Airbus DC. The two firms control 99%. Acha, dominant ta ki? Is there anybody in this class who doesn't use Gillette blades? Is there anybody in this class who doesn't use Gillette? কেউ আছে যে জিলে ব্যবহার করে না, অন্য কোনো ব্লেড ব্যবহার করে for shaving?
মনে হয় না স্যার।
এই তো, see, that means even in American context, according to 10-year previous data, 80% of the market was dominated by Gillette. So when we talk about few firms, there's four ways of doing it. Number one, the top four firms have 50% market share. Number two, the top three firms are dominant, like this. Number three, the top two firms are dominating, and another one is a single firm is dominating. ঠিক আছে? আচ্ছা, এখন এই data, can we construct this data in the context of Bangladesh? Is data available in a particular industry? Does anybody know? Is data available?
Sorry, sir. Data in what?
For example, আমি যদি একটা বাংলাদেশের যে কোনো একটা ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে জানতে চাই, if there are dominating firms, can I get data?
So as far as I know, it's not easy to do this.
I think you can get it for pharmaceutical industries, তাই না? Can you get it for pharmaceutical industries?
Yes, sir. There are studies where we can find the data.
Okay, good. So it is possible to find data for a dominant single firm in Bangladesh, duopoly firms, tripoly firms, and also the less concentrated firms. Okay, so what we are going to try to think, why are there a difference here? Why is it that here 4 firms are dominating? Why is it that here 3 firms are dominating, 2 over here, 1 over here? This is the food for thought. Why is it that in the razor blade market, we have a single large producer, Gilet? In the duopoly firms markets, we have 2. Tripoly, ekhane 3টা আছে. Another thing is worldwide tobacco. This is what we are going to think, and you guys will have to think as well. Acha, Augustine Cournot, the first model. This is just to know that what he did. He started off with a model that before I start oligopoly models, up to now, is there any question anybody wants to ask? Is there any question? Or shall I move on to the models?
No, sir.
Okay, then I'll move on to the models. Okay. Augustine Cournot was a French mathematician, and later on he was also a politician in the Education Ministry of France. So he came up with this model that there's 2 producers. Okay, and they own a natural resource, spring water. There's only 2 people who can supply spring water. Now, if the spring water comes from a single source and there are 2 sellers, as a consumer, will you see the 2 sellers' items as different? If the spring water comes from a single source and the single source is such that they're selling the same thing, will you see the 2 items as different? তোমাদের চোখে কি এটা ডিফারেন্ট মনে হবে?
Sir.
No, sir.
So he started off with this assumption that 2 sellers are selling mineral water or spring water, so they're selling the same item. So if one seller charges a higher price, the other everybody will go to the other seller. So they're selling homogeneous products, although there are only 2 sellers. Gallo. Second thing that he assumed was the 2 sellers were equally efficient. What does that mean? Farm A and farm B have the same capacity power to produce something. তার মানে one farm does not have a production advantage over the other. Okay, does that make sense then? If 2 farms are equally efficient?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now how was modeling done in this context? When A decides how much water he will produce, he assumes that B will not change his output. Okay, when A decides, this is the assumption, we'll find that this is a very bad assumption. When A decides how much to produce, A assumes that B will not change its output. Okay, now if the total demand is Q, then of this, QA is the A's output, QB is B's output. If I know how much QB is going to produce, that means QB is not changing its output. What does A do? Doesn't A produce only this much? If total demand is QA plus QB is equal to capital Q, and I know how much QB is. So what does QA do? QA will supply the remainder of the total output, right? Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if we play this game only once, we have one solution. If this game is played every day, then we have another solution. If it is such that the 2 farms will supply the water only once in their entire lifetime, then what will happen? This is the solution of the game. But if both of them are supplying every day, can we assume that QB will remain unchanged every time? Can we assume that QB will remain unchanged every time?
No, sir.
Correct. So what happens is, if the game carries on and again, then finally what will happen? An equilibrium will arise. Now, this is how we are going to define an equilibrium. When neither A nor B has any incentive to change their decision. When neither A nor B has any incentive to change their decision, given what the other person is doing. আমরা এতদিন equilibrium কিভাবে এভাবে বলছি না, যে left side and the right side balanced with each other, right? এইভাবে তো আমরা ডিফাইন করেছি, তাই না?
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, এখন আমরা এই কনসেপ্টটাকে একটু চেঞ্জ করব. We're going to relax this concept a little bit. This one is left for you, no? Okay. If this is A and this is B, A decides based on what B does. B decides based on what A does. তারা যদি এখানে আসে, does any one of the two have any incentive to change given what the other person is doing?
No, sir.
This is the Nash equilibrium that we will try to establish in the last part of today's class. I'll just repeat it now. Just keep it in your head. When the time comes again, it's going to be very simple. This is how we defined equilibrium so far. That this is demand, this is supply. So now what we're going to do, demand is determined given what supply is on the market. The reverse is also true. Supply is determined given what demand is on the market. If the two balance, then this is the Nash equilibrium. Just keep this thing in mind. So what happens, one lady was saying that this QB will not remain unchanged if we play the game again and again. Why that will happen, we'll introduce this when game theory comes. আচ্ছা, কার্টেলের নাম শুনছে সবাই? Have you heard the word cartel? Have you heard the word cartel?
No,
Yes,
sir.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, no sir কে বলছে?
Sir, নাহিদা।
আচ্ছা, no problem. এটা শুনো, একটা জিনিস না জানাটা কোনো অন্যায় না. Who said that they haven't heard cartel? Nahida?
Yes, sir. I don't hear this.
Okay, lovely. So, but right now you've heard, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. The same. এতদিন শোনেন নাই, but now you heard it. Have you heard this organization OPEC?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. OPEC.
Okay. OPEC দুইটা আছে, একটা হচ্ছে Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, আর হচ্ছে Organization for Arab Petroleum Countries. আচ্ছা, এটার নাম কেউ শুনছে? OPEC?
শুনেছি স্যার OPEC।
আচ্ছা, OPEC কেউ জানে OPEC কি? Does anybody know? Has anybody heard the word OPEC?
No, sir.
OPEC হচ্ছে Organization for Banana Exporting Countries.
Okay.
Okay, and most of these countries are from the Caribbean in the West Indies. ওদের একমাত্র কি বলে export commodity হচ্ছে bananas. এরকম অনেক দেশ আছে কিন্তু. So a cartel is actually when two sovereign nations decide how much to produce. জিনিসটা ভালো মতো খেয়াল করে, when sovereign nations, for example, Saudi Arabia and Iraq, these two decide, okay, we're going to pump in this amount of petroleum today. I'll pump in this much, Iraq will pump in this much, okay, Kuwait will pump in this much, then price will be determined on the market, international market, একটা barrel কত হবে. When private firms do this, in 99 out of 100 cases, this is an illegal arrangement. When we talk about cartels, we are talking about independent nations. For example, Bangladesh and India can make a cartel regarding, let's say, for example, Sundarban. Sundarban, part of it is in Bangladesh, part of it is in West Bengal in India. Okay, so Bangladesh and India can have a joint settlement that we are going to produce plant lots of vegetation in this the joint Sundarban. Okay, but বাংলাদেশে দুইটা প্রাইভেট কোম্পানি যদি এটা করে এটা ইলিগাল হবে না?
Yes, sir.
So that's why when we talk about cartel, we are talking about all sovereign nations. For example, OPEC is a cartel about with Arab nations. OPEC is a cartel with non-Arab nations. OPEC is mainly West Indian nations. এগুলো আরো অনেক cartel আছে. So cartels are actually a formal or informal agreement between firms in an oligopoly. Agreement money hoche they jointly decide to do something. What do they jointly decide to do? Either they decide আমরা এইটুক output তৈরি করব, we won't produce more than certain amount of output, or we jointly decide what the price of a particular commodity will be. Bangladeshe cartels are illegal, but in the media we hear the word syndicates, তাই না?
Yes, sir.
সিন্ডিকেট শব্দটা কিন্তু আমরা প্রায় শুনি, তাই না? যে ফর এক্সাম্পল এই যে একটা ঈদের আগে বিফোর ঈদ all the transport companies they syndicate to make sure that the price is never below a certain amount, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
In the US there is a certain amount of cartels you can do privately. For example, cooperatives in agriculture, they can set the price. Acha, are you familiar with this organization? This is the only cartel that can be private. IATA.
Yes, sir. International Air Transport Association.
Perfect. Who said that?
It's me. Tariq
Me?
Adnan.
কি নাম?
Sir, Tariq Adnan Shetu.
Tariq Adnan. Okay. Yes. একটা টিকেট প্রাইস কত হবে private airlines can determine. ঠিক আছে? We'll look at that. আমরা যেটাতে interested, what are the factors that can contribute towards firms colluding in an industry? This is what we are interested in. We are interested in what factors contribute to successful collusion in an industry. Actually, these are the factors. Now, these are all common sense. I'll read them and you tell me why it may be so. When the number of sellers decreases, collusion becomes difficult. I'll repeat myself. When the number of sellers decrease, collusion becomes difficult. Why? When the number of sellers decrease, collusion becomes difficult. Why?
It becomes monopolistic.
So, for example, there's 5 sellers. 5 years later, you come back to this industry and you see 3 sellers. উত্তরটা এই পৃষ্ঠাতেই আছে. It's in this slide. Can you spot it? When the number of sellers decreases, collusion becomes difficult. Why?
Products are too differentiate. Sir.
No, products may be homogeneous as well.
They cannot meet the demand of customers.
Sir, because of threat of entry.
Threat of retaliation.
Yes, sir, threat of retaliation.
Because what happens when the number of producers fall, suppose 3 জন আছে, হ্যাঁ, আগে 5 জন ছিল, যে কোন একজন বিক্রয় বসলে কিন্তু ওই collusion-এ you cannot charge a high price. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So that's why threat of retaliation in karone what happens is when the number of sellers decrease, collusion becomes difficult. We'll see some examples of this. Product differentiation. When products are too differentiated, collusion becomes difficult. Why? AJ, look at this one. এখানে কি কোনো বড় ফার্মের মার্কেট শেয়ার আছে ডমিনেন্ট?
No, sir.
Why? Because the tobacco industry, they almost produce very similar product, তাই না? Product differentiation তো ওখানে অনেকটা কসমেটিক না?
Yes, sir.
That's why here it is. Where is it? Okay. Yeah. When product differentiation is very high, that means collision becomes difficult. This is one argument. Second argument is, do you think Toyota will make a collision with say Maruti Suzuki? They can merge. দুটা ফার্ম মার্জ করতে পারে, ঠিক আছে? They become Toyota Maruti tomorrow morning. But do you think Toyota and Maruti, when they're operating on their own, will come to a collusion?
Never.
No, sir.
Acha, who said no, and why do you think no?
Because their products are different, sir.
Their
Right.
products are very much different.
So their features and the other things are different.
Yes, so the differentiation there is a real differentiation. It's not cosmetic. ঠিক আছে? এই ইন্ডাস্ট্রি গুলোতে আমরা ওইরকম ভাবে ডিফারেন্সিয়েশন দেখবো না, কিন্তু ইয়েতে when things are very similar to each other, then that means they're not highly differentiated like the tobacco industry, then collusion becomes acha. Cost structure hole ki cost structure differ when cost structures differ, collusion is difficult. Why? Cost structure is also an indicator of how efficient a farm is. If my cost structure is very high, ঠিক আছে, and another farm's cost structure is very low, then that farm is more efficient than I am. Then what will happen over time? Our number 5 টা চলে আসবে, তাই না? The more efficient firm can retaliate over time. Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If as a firm we get upper hand and
Yeah.
retaliate, then the one that's not
Yeah.
efficient will fall.
Correct. আচ্ছা, আরেকটা হচ্ছে, if a farm has a huge fixed cost, then the farm doesn't have an incentive to collude. Why does that happen? For example, fixed cost is very high and it's an oligopoly. How can I give an example? Fixed cost is very high and it's an oligopoly. How can I give an example? Electricity producing farms. Lots of electricity is now being produced by the private sector, isn't it? Do you know?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
So what happens is their cost, fixed costs, some farms fixed cost is very high when they operate in a big scale. Some farms of fixed cost is low when they operate in a lower scale. So if the fixed cost is very high, the farms don't have an incentive to collude. Acha, why do you think this is correct? When orders are small and frequent, collusion is more likely. Again, we have the answer over here. When orders are very large, come on. For example, let me give you an answer. If Daraz and Evali, they decide to collude, okay, they're both online companies. They you make an order and they'll supply to you. But যে কোনো একটা threat of retaliation থাকবে না? If Daraz and Evali decide to collude, both are very big players on the market. So their orders are not small. ঠিক আছে? Don't you think that one of the two can retaliate? Can you hear me? Don't you think that one of the two can retaliate?
স্যার পয়েন্টটা বুঝি নাই, আরেকবার একটু বলেন।
আচ্ছা, সেটা হচ্ছে the condition here is collusion is more likely when orders are small. When orders are big, if I'm giving the big order, I can make a threat to the other person with whom I'm colluding over time. If the orders are small, then my threat is not going to influence the total transaction. Does that make sense now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what happens is a collusion is a function of two things: how we trust each other, number one. Number two, collusion, as we will see in a little while, over time collusion does not exist. Can exist করেন এটা আমরা next class এ দেখবো, but for the time being, আচ্ছা, অলিগোপলিজম আরেকটা হচ্ছে প্রাইস লিডারশিপ। এটা বাংলাদেশে আছে কিভাবে? one firm declares a price, other firms follow the price. এরকম উদাহরণ can you give a example? One firm declares a price for air travel from Dhaka to Chittagong or Dhaka to Cox's Bazar. Say Dhaka to Chittagong is 3,000 taka or 3,500 taka, whatever. Novo Air tomorrow declares. What will happen what response will happen from the other companies? তারা ওই সবাই ওই প্রাইসটাকে ফলো করবে না?
Yes, sir.
Acha, same thing happens with bus travel, inter-district bus travels. If you go to two different suppliers, do you see too much difference in the prices? For example, you want to go from Dhaka to Chittagong, you can go by Sohag, you can also go by Green Line. Same features, same, maybe the same bus. Is there too much difference between the prices?
No, sir.
Okay.
Acha. Why? One of the two firms over here declared a price that this is the price of
So one firm's price is influenced by other.
definitely, but one of the two firms declares a price, other firms in the industry follow that price. If you go there, Dhaka Chittagong is not a good example. If you go to say Dhaka Pabna, Dhaka Rajshahi, you see that very few companies are operating in these routes: Dhaka Rajshahi, Dhaka Pabna, Dhaka Rangpur, etc. But the price of the tickets are very similar to each other. This is an informal cartel. Informal. Why this happens? Because they play the game, I'll come to that later. Acha. There's two types of price leaderships. Barometric price leadership হচ্ছে anybody can declare a price, others follow. এই যে একটা উদাহরণ হচ্ছে এই যে যেটা আমি দিলাম এখন, in the air industry, maybe tomorrow morning, Novo declares a price and remaining follow. You think about more examples like this, okay? Dominant price leadership হচ্ছে when the largest firm in the industry declares a price, the remainders have to follow. এটা বাংলাদেশে খুব একটা উদাহরণ নাই. There's an international example. Are you aware of Apple streaming? Apple এর যে streaming service আছে না, পডকাস্ট হোক বা গান হোক.
Yes, sir, I do.
Do you know how the pricing is done? You don't know how the pricing is done there, right?
No, sir.
Acha. সেটা হচ্ছে Apple determines if there are 100 suppliers who will supply their podcasts on Apple Podcasts or their songs or other types of music in Apple Stream. Apple decides how much revenue each firm will get. This is dominant price leadership. And whatever Apple declares, the remainders follow. Why? Because Apple is such a large platform. Okay, so whatever you Apple says, even if you listen to Apple, you get a chunk of their market dominance. Let me give you another example. Do you know how many foreign movies can be shown in China every year?
No, sir.
36, 32 or 36. I can't remember the exact figure. ঠিক আছে, China, the Chinese regulatory board, their censor board, they determine which 36 movies will be shown in 2021 or 2022. Acha. Why is it an incentive? Say, Ami Bangladeshi film producer. Why do I want to enter that market? China has the largest number of cinema halls in the world. Do you know that?
No, sir.
Nobody
Yes, sir.
knows.
There are movies, those are specifically for Chinese markets. They edit it specially.
Now that they do, সেটার অন্য জিনিস, কিন্তু do you know
স্যার
that
ওটা আপনি হচ্ছে মুভিটা চাইনিজ ওদের সেন্সর বোর্ডে ঢুকবে না যদি ওরা হচ্ছে ওই স্পেশালি এডিট না করে।
না তা হোক, কিন্তু China has the highest number of cinema halls. আমরা যদি
স্যার এটা জানতাম, মানে মুভি নিয়ে একটু ঘাটাঘাটি করি।
আচ্ছা, that's good. না আমরা যদি হঠাৎ করে এই প্রশ্ন করি যে which country has the highest number of cinema halls, আমরা সাথে সাথে বলবো না ইন্ডিয়া।
Yes, sir.
আমরা তো মানে বাংলাদেশের লোকজন কিন্তু হঠাৎ করে যদি এই প্রশ্ন করা হয়, unless we are aware, like the person who said that মুভি নিয়ে ঘাটাঘাটি করে, most of the people will say India. The highest number of cinema halls is in China, and most probably that is 60,000 plus. And China shows only 36 movies. Chinese censor board, they decide which movies will enter. Acha, if you are a film producer in Bangladesh, if you get the chance to enter the Chinese market, will you ওদের সাথে তর্ক করবা কেউ?
Definitely not, sir.
Definitely not. This is dominant price leadership. Because China has a physical platform, because Apple has a virtual platform. ঠিক আছে, যেটার কারণেই হোক, that's why in dominant price leadership models, one dominant firm decides the price, everybody else accepts it. Why? Because China যদি বিক্রয় বসে, next year they might not they might say for next year we won't let Bangladeshi films enter the Chinese market. Shesh. You get you lose the opportunity to enter a very big market. Acha, এখন historically, this is an observation which you will see, find if you do strategic management course later on in your MBA program. Pollutions don't last more than 7 years. Maximum 7 years. This is a rule of thumb rule. 7 বছরের বেশি কোনো pollution exist করে না. Can you think why? Can you think why no pollution lasts more than 7 years? কেউ ভাবতে পারবে?
Yes, sir.
Because if a few firms now join, in 7 years, do you think that their efficiency, their capacity will remain the same over 7 years?
No, sir. Either will increase or decrease.
The strong one can become weak. The strong one can even become more strong. Okay, so what happens? The longer the time frame, these pollutions don't exist. Pollution requires cooperation to happen. Cooperation normally doesn't tend to last too long. This happens due to prisoner's dilemma, which we will be discussing later. Okay. Acha, before we start game theory, can I give a little break for five minutes?
Sure, sir.
I'll give a break, and then because I just really the wait. At a break there, এখন বাজে হলো 7:40. I'll come back at 7:45. আচ্ছা, আমি সব মিটিং end করছি so that I can